In 1986, Nintendo was kicking ass with its Famicom/Nintendo Entertainment System in both Japan and the USA. Thanks to that, the gaming industry had been revived after the 1983 video game crash. Nintendo was selling millions thanks to the platforming Super Mario Bros. And the adventuring Legend of Zelda. What came next though was a space-based action game developed by Gunpei Yokoi and Nintendo's R&D 1. That game was Metroid. Released on August 6, 1986 on the Famicom Disk System in Japan, and a year later on NES in North America, saw the game produced by legendary Nintendo developer, the late Gunpei Yokoi. The title screen as well as the manual will explain the backstory. You are playing famous space bounty hunter Samus Aran, whose mission is to land on Zebes and defeat a race known as the Space Pirates, who are working on cloning an evil, life-sucking creatures known as Metroids, and were led by a creature known simply as Mother Brain. When you begin the game, Samus Aran appears and you can shoot from a missile cannon on your arm. Shut up! As well as that, Samus also has the very peculiar ability that allows them to roll up into a little ball. Metroid would feature platforming like in Super Mario Bros. And additional weapons like in Legend of Zelda, but both aspects were greatly enhanced. Metroid was one of the first games to feature a direction that had never been seen before in a 2D side-scroller up until then: walking left. Metroid was one of the first games where you didn't just push right, but instead explored. As well as that, the upgraded weapons, unlike in other games, were permanent features. The weapons include missiles, ice beam, and morph ball bombs. Due to its giant maze-like structure, Metroid was one of those games you couldn't finish off in one sitting. The original Famicom Disk System version had the ability to save your progress like in Legend of Zelda. However, unlike Legend of Zelda, that mechanic wouldn't be available in the American NES version, instead implementing a sort of save password feature. The reason behind this is that unlike other Famicom Disk games like Zelda, Metroid didn't sell well in Japan. However, it would do amazing in America. Continuing the list of first, this is one of the first games that would feature alternate endings. This was based on how quick it took you to complete the game. Beating the game in 1 hour will reveal a twist not even that crackpot M. Night could see coming. Samus was a babe. A hot, 8-bit bikini-clad babe. And I think everyone reacted in one of two ways.
Is that true? That's impossible!
Or
oh fuck, the keyboard.
the drive to complete the game as fast as possible gave birth to a concept known as speedrunning, a concept where someone finishes a game with the fastest time possible, and most items collected. The game also featured many hidden paths which would feature interesting Easter eggs. The most infamous one is the Justin Bailey code. Importing this lets you play as a skimpy dress wearing green haired Samus. While Mario got 2 NES sequels and Link got 1, it didn't seem likely due to the lackluster sales in Japan that a Metroid sequel would be heading to the NES. It wouldn't be until 1989 when R&D1, still led by Gunpei Yokoi, would release the Game Boy. And 2 years later, would see the return of Samus in the cleverly titled Metroid 2, Return of Samus. Whatever, let's just play the game. Released on August 26, 1991 in the US and January 2nd the next year in Japan, saw the first and only Metroid game to be developed by Intelligent Systems. Not to mention the only game not involving the other man behind the franchise, Yoshio Sakamoto, who was working on something else at the time. Like any Game Boy game, naturally the graphics had to be slimmed down to fit the portable screen, but the gameplay and controls were as fine as they were on the NES. The game would see Samus landing on the planet SR388 with a mission to eradicate the Metroids. In the original game, when Samus retrieved the fireproof Various suit, her armor turned purple, but due to the monochromatic nature of the handheld, she instead was given giant circular shoulder pads on her armor to tell the difference, a change that became standard for the heroine. Like the previous game, Metroid 2 featured a much more linear game style. During her journey into the depths of SR388, Samus battled 5 forms of Metroids, from regular to Zeta. However, the game ended with a fight with a Metroid Queen. Once vanquished, Samus came across something quite surprising: a freshly hatched Metroid, who mistook Samus for her mother. Instead of destroying it, Samus took it with her, and once again, if you finished fast enough, Samus showed once again how beautiful she is. Huh? Oh, right. But just like on the NES, Samus wouldn't make a return to the Game Boy. At least not until a future iteration of it. What came next isn't just considered one of the best Metroid games, but one of the best games ever made. A game that could only be described as super. Released in 1994, almost 4 years after the SNES release, was the third Metroid game entitled Super Metroid, and at its release was the biggest SNES cartridge available on the market at a whopping 24 megs. The game opens up with a recap of Metroid 2, showing that Samus handed the baby Metroid to scientists to do research on it to better help the universe. Tragically, as soon as Samus leaves the research station, it's attacked by the space pirate General Ridley and takes the baby Metroid to the nearby planet of Zebes, where the franchise started. From the moment you enter the depths of Zebes, you realize this isn't just a cheap remake. Oh, no. This is Metroid on goddamn steroids. When gamers popped this monster into their SNES, what they got was beyond anything they had seen on the SNES. Yes, anything. And considering this game came out after all this, that was very impressive. The game featured many amazing locales, from the lava-intense Nofar, to the refreshing water-filled Meridia, to a fucking actual haunted ship. Controls were incredibly tight. You were now finally able to shoot in 8 directions, making quick action against those fucking hanging things. But there was one thing I always hated about Super Metroid: wall jumping. I couldn't for the life of me do it properly, and neither could other people. Right, Storm?
Okay, Samus. We're gonna wall jump. Don't make this complicated. Ah!
Nice guy. The game's atmosphere was isolated and desolate. No game up until then, even the previous Metroid games, offered an experience like Super Metroid. Everything from the different areas to the amazing music done by Kenji Yamamoto and Minaka Hamano. Super Metroid would also feature one of the most shocking endings on the SNES. Weakened by Mother Brain and staring death in the eyes, Samus was saved by the baby Metroid, now fully grown, who sacrificed himself for his mother. Super Metroid was met with universal acclaim, and despite releasing in 1994 at the tail end of the SNES lifecycle, it sold 1.5 million copies. After seeing what the Metroid franchise could offer, gamers couldn't wait to see what happened next. Too bad it would take 7 years for that to happen. For the good part of a decade, Samus was MIA, and besides the original Smash Brothers, she did not even appear on the N64. In an interview, Miyamoto was noted as saying that during the entire 64 era, the development team looked into a new Metroid title, but couldn't come up with any concrete ideas at the time. During that time, however, another franchise would take Metroid's gameplay and enhance it. That series was Castlevania. Released in 1997 on the original PlayStation, the game took Metroid's branching non-linear paths and added RPG elements. Symphony of the Night, which originally started as a side project signifying the series' farewell to 2D, would be such a major critical and financial success to Konami that the series instead would continue down this path. Castlevania took Metroid's playstyle and redefined it enough that any game that resembles it or Metroid is now dubbed Metroidvania. But finally, after years of waiting, the bounty hunter finally returned on the new Game Boy Advance in Metroid Fusion. As of right now, this is the last game in the Metroid timeline, and no, I don't mean apparent or speculated timeline. You see, unlike other Nintendo franchises, Metroid actually has a confirmed Oh yeah, Hyrule Historia. Yeah, never mind, let's just go with the game. The game begins with Samus leading an expedition to SR388. While there, she came across an unknown parasite that latched onto and attacked her. Samus was near death due to the parasite, but was saved after scientists removed parts of her damaged suit and administered a vaccine taken from the Metroid hatchling that saved her life once before. Because of this, Samus acquired Metroid-like powers. Afterwards, Samus is sent to investigate a nearby space station, which she discovers is swarming with the same virus that almost killed her. The virus known as the X-Parasite has the ability to absorb and replicate the host before killing it. Samus, with her new Metroid-like abilities, is able to absorb these X-Parasites herself, which replace both health and ammo. Unfortunately, the X-Parasite was able to, thanks to Samus's old armor, make a complete replication of Samus's power armor. Throughout the game, you come across your clone, dubbed SAX, in your game of cat and mouse with her. Being on the 32-bit GBA, the game is as close to a Super Metroid sequel we would see for a good part of a decade. The only real problem with Fusion is there are times when enemies are terribly unbalanced. There are these boss battles with super cheap moves who can take 2 entire energy units in one strike. According to reviews, Metroid Fusion was much more linear compared to previous titles, but by that time people were so starved for a new Metroid, most didn't care. And besides, what was offered was still an amazing game. But, on the same day as Fusion, we saw another Metroid game that changed the entire landscape of the franchise. Back in 1997, Iguana Entertainment would release the original Turok on N64, with a sequel the following year. These games were some of the best first-person shooters on the N64, with some amazing graphics and even more graphic violence. After its founder Jeff Spangberg left the studio, he formed a partnership with Nintendo to create a new studio. In the end, they would create Retro Studios in Austin, Texas, along with the task of developing games for the upcoming GameCube. But from then till 2000, nothing came to be, until Miyamoto suggested the Metroid license. What came out of that was Metroid Prime. Original beta trailers showed Samus being controlled from the third person, but once again, after a suggestion from Miyamoto, the game was brought into first-person perspective. Like most first-party IPs during the GameCube era, it was met with initial concern when it was discovered to be a first-person Metroid game. Those concerns were met head-on when Prime was released on the same day as Fusion. Instead of opting for a dual analog aiming system, Retro used a mechanic which I believe is a million times better than that: lock-on combat. Using the shoulder button to lock on and the A button to shoot, Samus could strafe while delivering epic power to her enemies. Everything fans loved about Metroid was reborn into glorious 3D. The item hunting, the boss battles, the sense of isolation was all present, and people loved it. As well as old favourites, the game featured many new and upgraded mechanics, including a map system that also displayed where you need to go. While this system also appeared in Fusion, Prime was the game to define it properly. The story goes that Samus receives a distress call from a research station circling planet Talon 4, and finds it riddled with space pirates, who appear to be experimenting with a substance known as Phazon, and does battle with a parasite queen before escaping the ship. Not before she has a terrible accident and loses all her power-ups. During her escape, she encounters her old nemesis Ridley, and follows him to Talon 4, where it's discovered that the space pirates have been experimenting with Metroids and Phazon. Like in Super Metroid, the game featured many different settings from lava to snow to underwater, and Samus's visor accommodated and adapted to each locale, having it freeze up, have goo on it, and if you angled it just right, you get a glimpse of our beauty's face. While playing, you never noticed a single now loading screen, using instead to take elevators and slow opening doors to hide the game's quick load times. You would also see different visors present in the new Prime game, with the most common one being the scan visor, which allowed you to activate platforms. Unlike in previous games, Prime focused more on items collected than on time of completion. The game was well received and is still considered one of the GameCube's best games, not to mention becoming one of the best-selling Metroid titles. But fans would soon realize that Prime wasn't just a subtitle, but a series on its own. However, next year, Metroid fans got a story they never heard of: the beginning, in comic form. Released between 2003 and 2004 were Metroidmongers published by Magazine Z, documenting Samus's young life. The story focuses on Samus and her parents' life on Colony K2L, who were there for the mining of the element afluorite. Hungry for it, Ridley leads his crew to attack the mining colony for the precious energy source, killing everyone, including Samus's parents. The only one to survive was 3-year-old Samus Aran. It was there she was rescued by the ancient alien race, the Chozo, who brought her back to their colony and infused their DNA with hers so she could sustain the harsh environment. The Chozo trained Samus for her to become a warrior, giving her her iconic power suit in the process. After years of training, she set out on her own to become an intergalactic bounty hunter. It's also revealed that the Chozo were the ones who created the Metroids in the first place, originally designing them as a weapon against the X-Parasite on SR-388, up until the space pirates get their hands on them. The 2-issue manga is available for free online. In 2004, R&D 1 remade the original Metroid for the GBA under the title Metroid Zero Mission. This wasn't just a graphic upgrade, everything was improved, even the story. After defeating Mother Brain and escaping to your ship, you and Samus get a sense of relaxation as she takes off her power armor, the Zero suits. Huh? Oh, right. Sorry, I should probably stop getting distracted. Yeah, it turns out she gets ambushed and crashes near a space pirate's mothership. Lacking her armor and only having an emergency pistol, Samus has to channel Solid Snake and avoid detection from the space pirates as she delves into the Chozo ruins and acquires a new spacesuit, before escaping on a spaceship and leaving the planet. Overall, a pretty good remake. But later that year, Retro Studios came back with a sequel to their masterpiece. Metroid Prime 2 Echoes. Prime 2 will be set on the planet Aethia, with Samus responding to a distress call from a vanished team of Space Marines. Unfortunately, her ship gets damaged. However, Samus soon encounters Dark Samus, which came to be at the perfect ending of the original Metroid Prime. It's soon discovered thanks to the friendly inhabitants of Aethia, the Luminoth, who inform her that the planet is split into two worlds, the Light and Dark World, which are inhabited by the Ing, who take all her weapons. Seriously, you'd think she'd have a backup of her power-ups in her ship the amount of times she loses them. Samus is required to travel between Light and Dark Aethia to complete the game, and like in other Light-Dark games, what happens in one world affects the other. If you gain a sense of deja vu, it's cause Kensuke Tanabe, the writer of Link to the Past, played a major part in Echoes' development. The game would feature new weapons including a light and dark cannon. Killing an enemy with one of those two weapons will give you the ammo for the other one. At the end, Samus faces and defeats the Emperor Ing, and as she runs to escape the crumbling Dark Aethia, in an oh so familiar self-destruct sequence, Samus has one last fight with Dark Samus before flying to safety. Prime 2 took the original Prime and built upon it, and it definitely did work. While Prime 2 wouldn't sell as much as the original, it was still an amazing game. At E3 2004, Reggie unveiled the revolutionary new Nintendo DS. So the first gameplay footage to accompany it was Metroid Prime Hunters. And when the console released that year, a demo of the game came in as a pack-in. However, it wouldn't be until 2006 that the full game came out. But until then, we got a game to tie us over. Pinball! Wait, what? That's right, in 2005, developed by Fuse Games, came Metroid Prime Pinball. It's pinball, based off Metroid Prime. Using Samus in her morph ball as the actual ball, you can play pinball versions of the first Metroid Prime, with artifacts to collect and even parts where Samus unravels and shoots from her gun. Honestly, it's a creative idea, but really not much to go on here. But finally, in 2006, the DS would get Metroid Prime Hunters. Using the D-pad to move, the stars to look, and the shoulder buttons to fire. As for me, however, I own a 3DS, and I must say the slide pad is so much better. The story goes that the Galactic Federation receives a strange telepathic message involving something called the Ultimate Power, and sends Samus to investigate. However, she isn't alone, as 6 other bounty hunters from across the galaxy are sent to explore it themselves. Gameplay was challenging and the controls were easy to pick up and play. When it was released, Hunters was one of the best looking handheld games from Nintendo. It was revolutionary and pushed the DS to its full potential. And it also brought something new to the table: multiplayer. While there was multiplayer in Echoes, it was local, and honestly it was clearly just packed in as an afterthought. But as for Hunters, it features some great handheld online multiplayer. Just wish Nintendo hadn't shut it down. One thing that's always puzzled me about Hunters is that while amazing on a handheld, the game's design looks like something that could have worked on the N64. Remember how Miyamoto said he couldn't think of any ideas back then? Yet they have this amazing first-person shooter title. But then again, who their studios could have made a shooter for the N64? At E3 2005, we got our first look at the upcoming Metroid Prime 3 for the then upcoming Nintendo Revolution. Initial reports said that the game would be released as a launch title for the Wii in 2006. Sadly, that didn't happen, as Metroid Prime 3 wouldn't see a release until August of that next year. When the game did come out though, holy shit did it blow people away. Not only did we see actual fellow humans, but fellow bounty hunter friends. The final part of the Prime series would see Dark Samus attack you and your friends and infect them with Phazon. After being out for a month, Samus is installed with a Phazon suit that allows her to go into hyper mode and unleash hell on anything that gets in her way. However, all your friends who have had the same suits installed have gone to other planets and have since lost contact. Remind me how that usually works out again? Oh, right. This would also see the first time you could interact with the inside of your ship. Being an early Wii title, the concept of motion controls was still unlimitless. Here we see you using the Wiimote to control Samus's hands as you fly to different planets and bases, not to mention flicking the nunchuck to use the grapple beam. However, Samus's Phazon suit corrupts and she becomes overloaded with Phazon, hence the title, and she's required to shoot out all the excess Phazon before she succumbs to the corruption. It was clear Retro Studios wasn't like other developers who released the same basic game every single time, as Prime 3 blew everyone away, with bigger worlds to explore, bigger action, as well as bringing your airship into the mess to rain hell down. Prime 3 has some of the best and tightest controls, and in my opinion, it's the best example of how to do an FPS on the Wii. Unlike other games I could mention. Altogether, Prime 3 sold about 1.5 million copies and finished off an amazing trilogy. Speaking of which, in 2009, all 3 console Prime games were remade for the Wii and slapped onto one disc, and that would be known as Metroid Prime Trilogy. All I can say is the great Wii controls from Corruption are on the remakes of the original and Echoes. However, finding a physical copy is easier said than done, with the US Steelbook version reaching a few $100s on eBay. Fortunately, it's available digitally on the Wii U eShop for a much more fair price. It's worth the buy. In all honesty, I believe the Wii controls are better than the GameCube controls. But about a month after that, it was announced at E3 2009 that Nintendo would team up with Team Ninja to make a brand new Metroid game called Other M. It's been about 6 years since that game came out. Now, you're probably expecting me to start screaming incoherently, calling it a dark mark on both Metroid and Nintendo's history, and trashing the game for the pile of shit that is. Well, guys, I don't know how to tell you this, but I like Other M. It's not like it's that big of a deal, right? Okay. Maybe some people do have a strong opinion about it. Other M actually starts off very promising with an amazingly detailed cinematic showing the epic conclusion of Super Metroid, showing glorious, stunning, eye-loving 480p. Then Samus starts to monologue.
I awoke to the familiar voice of a quarantine officer. A dream. I had been reliving the tragic moments of my recent past. None of the baby remained on me. I knew it to be true, but still couldn't help looking at my palm. At the time, I felt surrounded by people who treated me like a child, or used kid gloves because I was a woman. It touched me on some level that Adam would acknowledge that past and call me some. I felt that if I let my guard down, I would easily be broken. And beyond that, I was scared. When the time came, I still left his side. I was so young. Young and naive.
God! That voice actress is bad enough, but damn this writing! It's like someone just took the Japanese script and just popped it through Google Translate. Ugh. Anyway, the story is that Samus follows yet another distress call to an abandoned space station and finds Galactic Federation soldiers, including her old commanding officer, Adam Malkovich. This presents another criticized aspect of the game. Instead of finding your suit upgrades like in every other game, Samus has her arsenal, but will only activate when Adam gives her permission to use it. With the missiles and bombs, I get it. but there's a truly cringeworthy moment when Samus is running through lava just waiting for Am to allow her to use her Varia suit. While it's no different from running through a lava-filled area hunting for the suit upgrades, you just have to stop and ask, what was the bloody hold-up? And that's not even counting the moment in the game where Samus seemingly goes into PTSD after encountering Ridley again. So you're probably asking me, if I've been nothing but negative, how can I say I like this game? Well, take the story, the writing, and Samus' characterization, and chuck it away! And what do we have left? An amazing looking 2.5D Metroid with a Samus that has some amazing kick-ass moves. It's so funny seeing her all brooding and whiny in cutscenes, and yet bringing her regular badass in the game. If I was a wanker, I'd say I'd be a ludonarrative dissonance. However, Other M was a major departure from the Prime games. While the first-person aspect was criticized, I generally found no issue with it. In an attempt to expand on Samus' backstory, Other M is a good, yet extremely flawed game. Still, you have to ask, what was Samus thinking doing this game? Did Team Ninja offer her a place in DOA 5? Maybe Extreme. Oh boy, that would have made that game a lot better. Unfortunately, following that, Samus went dark for another 5 years. Despite her regular appearance in Smash Bros., this time her Varia and Zero Suit as separate characters, albeit with new footwear for Zero Suit, there was no Metroid game released for the Wii U. However, this past year to celebrate the 30th anniversary of Metroid, saw a release of the series' first title on 3DS. The game would be a 4-player co-op where you would play members of the Galactic Federation, visiting numerous planets. It was called Metroid Prime Federation Force. Unfortunately, the reaction from fans was kind of... What the f***? Well, it's been out for about a month or so, and folks, it really isn't that bad. Well, okay then. Anyway. Oh, crap. Federation Force canonically is set after Corruption and has you play as a new cadet of the Galactic Federation, and has you going through basic training and then to missions on 3 separate planets, fighting numerous creatures, bosses, and space pirates. Samus herself only gets featured in debriefings, and because you're not Samus Aran, you pilot a mech suit and only carry a certain amount of weapons and health, which you decide on before you go on each mission. It's made to plan strategies between the 4 players, but because I'm a pathetic loser with no friends, I just play in solo mode. The game does play a lot like Prime with its lock-on combat and strafing. I'll be missing the scan feature. That being said, trying to play this on a regular 3DS as I capture footage is a real, strain on my hands. It wasn't until I switched it out for my original XL with the Circle Pad Pro that it felt much better. Honestly, Federation Force isn't bad, and while I'm sure many people would have preferred a 3DS port of the original Prime, oh god, yes! Much like Other M, it's an attempt to expand the Metroid universe, and if you can find enough friends, you're sure to have a ball. Blast Ball! Right! Fed Force does come with a second game, which has you in a 3-on-3 match, shooting with a giant ball into the other player's goal. I mean, it's pretty good. I like Rocket League like any other person. Of course, in Rocket League, when you hit the ball, it actually fucking moves. This year celebrates Samus Aran's 30th birthday. Though admittedly, she looks no older than 21. But much like her 25th anniversary, it's widely been forgotten, and I I really can't blame Nintendo for celebrating more successful franchises. Metroid has always been one of Nintendo's more cult-like franchises, with the highest sales it ever got was Metroid Prime on the GameCube, selling 2.8 million copies. Plus, one of the main reasons Metroid was entrusted to an American studio for so long was simply because Japanese gamers have just never shown interest in the franchise. Funny enough, the best tribute for Samus's 30th birthday didn't even come from Nintendo. It came from one lone fan who spent the last 10 years recreating the Game Boy's Metroid 2 in the Starlight Zero mission, and releasing it on August 6th this year. It would be known as AM2R. Now, I know what you're thinking. Nintendo did file a cease and desist on this game, but I mean, what are they gonna do? Take down this... Get that off! Ah! Anyway, the game itself is actually pretty good. I know the original was on the Game Boy, but that didn't mean you couldn't have given us a widescreen option. But besides that, what's on offer is a fairly accurate remake of the original with some of Samus's more recent abilities thrown in. Although, by now, you're probably wondering how I'm getting this without getting sued. See, while Nintendo did in fact file a cease and desist on this game, they didn't do it until a month after the game had been released. So the game wasn't just downloaded probably a million times, but they also managed to release an update. Now, I could go on and on about how Nintendo is a backwards company when it comes to situations like this, and they should embrace their fans like other companies instead of shutting down AM2R, Pokemon Uranium, and the first 13 years of Nintendo Power on the Internet Archive. And no, I'm not kidding about that last one. But ultimately, these are Nintendo's properties, and this is a very, very stubborn company, who, let's face it, never quite forgets the past. As for the future of Metroid, at least, while the series never saw a title on Wii U, evidence does seem to suggest a new title is in the works, and if the endings of Corruption and Fed Force suggest anything, that game is Prime 4. For the upcoming Nintendo Switch. But there's so much potential for this series. I know that Other M wasn't to everyone's taste, but imagine taking that 2.5D engine and the amazing cutscenes by D-Rockets and make a from-the-ground-up remake of Super Metroid. Oh yeah. But it's apparent that Japan are just not a fan of the first-person genre. So maybe Metroid needs another third-person title. Maybe a beat-em-up. But who could develop this? Who has experience with third-person beat-em-ups? Who knows how to work with Nintendo IPs? Who knows how to make a game with a kick-ass lead female character? Oh well. But, until Prime 4, there's almost a dozen titles to delve into. And never forget, where there's trouble in the galaxy, where pirates may loom, you know Samus will be there to kick their ass. And proceed to show hers.